Hello, my name is Chris Snipes, and you are listening to The Melt. Gnosticism is a subject that tends to be dismissed by many people simply because of its association with Christianity, and only often gets proper attention from academics or religious studies majors. This is unfortunate, as Gnosticism has such a unique take on the cosmos and the nature of what we think of as reality that parts of it sound like they could be lifted straight from a Philip K. Dick book or a science fiction movie. There are concepts that Gnosticism deals with that share many similarities to simulation theory and that can help us to wrap our minds around the possibility that perhaps everything that we take for granted in our workaday mundane existence is an illusion that has been constructed to purposefully delude us into thinking that there is nothing to this world but what we can interact with our crude senses. That we look to material reductionist scientism to explain the universe to us, and think that there is nothing left to directly experience save what the experts have already quantified for us, is nothing short of a systemic hoodwink. If we are indoctrinated to think that the purpose of life is to spend the majority of our lives working at jobs that make rich people richer, and to acquire objects that lull us into thinking that we are living the good life, then the archons have won. Whilst the demiurge laughs all the way to the bank where all of the imaginary money is kept, we are left with the illusion that our happiness lies outside of ourselves, and that greed and selfishness are inherent in human nature. I call bullshit, and so do the Gnostics. Today's guest, Laurence Galian, is a wealth of Gnostic knowledge, and he is here today to share some of it with us. He has recently gone through a bout of bad health, but has fortunately recovered, and before we get into talking about Gnosticism and his new book, Alien Parasites, 40 Gnostic Truths to Defeat the Archon Invasion, he recounts his recent health struggles. I start off the interview by asking him about his recent close call with death.
Close call is really the word for it, and maybe shaking hands with death. It was an experience that certainly I'll never forget. And but part of it, strangely enough, is blanked out of my mind.
Because of the nature of the whatever it was that you were going through?
Well, yes, in part, and then other part from traumatic pain that was so horrible that I blissfully, thank God, it's been removed from my memory, that certain aspects of the pain. But yeah, my wife rushed me to the hospital recently because I was having trouble breathing. It started out as a cold and nothing more than a light cold. And I took the cold medicine for it. And that didn't seem to kick it out of my system. So I went to the doctor and he prescribed for me some antibiotic that I took. And I just seemed to be getting worse. A lot of a lot of coughing and um, mm, but I didn't think it was emergency room time or anything like that.
Sure.
But I did notice that one night that it was really getting out of control, and we decided that the best thing to do would be to go to the emergency room. So now this is where things begin to be a lot hazy for me, because actually I ended up in two hospitals. The first night we went to the Red Cross, and I can only remember being led to a bed in 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 the Red Cross. Clearly, I had been accepted as a patient. I don't remember being admitted. All I remember thinking is, oh, there's a nice bed next to this with a nice Red Cross blanket. And yeah, I really remember that blanket as being so cozy looking. And I thought, this is great. My wife can stay here with me. And so I remember that very clearly. But apparently they said that I was fine, and after giving me they gave me like respiratory treatments in inhalation therapy, and quite a great deal of that. But I don't have specific memory of the therapy that they gave me. And I later learned, a doctor told me very recently that a chest infection can have a direct effect on the mind, and I always suspected that, because in my past I had pneumonia when I was 8 years old, and I can remember being prescribed sulfur. And yes,
Sulfur.
sulfur. Can you imagine that? And
How do you take sulfur?
well, I think the devil sells it.
He has the best drugs.
Right? Don't they say that when you smell sulfur, it's a sign that there's evil spirits around?
Or children.
Or children. Yeah, well, who's diabolical here, Chris? So, well, anyway, I don't know where I was, but I came home, obviously somehow, from the Red Cross, thinking I was cured or whatnot, but no. And within a day or so, I realized I had to go back to I had to try. What was the plan? I think a local private hospital, because here in Mexico, they have the private hospitals, and they can cost a pretty penny. In other words, it's for the rich expats and Americans who are living down here. And then there's the large public hospitals, which can often be like zoos and are basically teaching hospitals. And but yeah, we did come across a good private hospital with reasonable rates, and so one night we decided to set off for this hospital, and this is when if I hadn't already began to lose my memory of events. This is when it really powerfully started to take effect. I can remember packing a bag, a briefcase full of books and my Kindle and other stuff, MP3 player, thinking that I was going to be somewhat in control of what's going to happen to me in the next 24 hours. And I couldn't have been further from the truth. I only remember getting into the taxi with my wife to go to this first emergency room, and apparently I had to take a dump real badly because I was making a big fuss about that, and I didn't have the strength to even support myself.
Wow.
So my wife, luckily in this private hospital, they had a nice bathroom, at least my wife tells me, and and she took me in and helped me do my business. And I don't remember any of that. And
Wow.
they told her at the private hospital, well, yes, we can stabilize him, but we're going to have to send him around to a lot of different other places for various treatments. And when so my wife asked, well, please show me like a rough estimate of what this is going to all amount up to. And when he showed her the figure, it was like unbelievable price. Yeah,
Like
it's
tens of thousands of American
yes,
dollars? Wow.
yes. It was like wow, and 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 still we didn't know what was happening to me. So my wife thought, well, the only thing to be done is to go to the super gigantic. My Spanish sometimes automatically kicks in. It's just difficult. You speak Spanish
Yeah,
almost 24/7, and
sure.
so anyway, the large public hospital, and I I don't remember any of that.
Wow.
But my wife, bless her heart, she was a great advocate for me. And also, there were a few angels. I really believe very strongly that there are um, angels that do come into our lives. Uh, Now, I don't want to like anyone to pin me down by saying that I'm talking about the Judeo-Christian Islamic type of angel, but I have noticed at times of crisis in my life that sometimes there appear men and women very very quickly, very surprisingly, that open up doors that are really not able to be opened normally, but they somehow do that very quickly for you. I remember one night with a flat tire in front of my house in Farmingdale, Long Island, and uh, the parking lot was a great deal distance away from the main road. The parking lot to my apartment, and so I was trying to get the tire off, and there was only one of these like sticks in the back with the spare tire, and it was just a little donut too. But I needed more leverage than just the one little stick to remove the nuts. So, and I was thinking, oh my God, what can I do? Because I was actually putting the stick on the nut and standing on it and jumping on it to try to remove it. And this was not working. And I was with my ex-wife at the time, who was from Colombia, and we were with her daughter, who was also from Colombia, and all of a sudden, from the main road, and like I said, not only were we a great distance from the main road, but this was nighttime. There were no lights on in the parking lot. So I was in almost complete darkness. Also, the flat tire was facing away from the main road, so I was behind the car, making it even more difficult to see me from the main road. But suddenly, this car, very, very fast, comes barreling from the opposite lane, not the lane closest to my apartment, but it was a 4-lane highway, and the opposite lane crosses a double yellow line, pulls into our parking lot, and it's a Hispanic man with his Hispanic wife or girlfriend, and he says, "Can I help you?" I didn't know where to look. Like,
Oh.
right. Say a quick Hail Mary or Glory be, and to prove that he was not just a normal person and that he was an angel, he actually said, "No, just relax. I'll change the tire for you." And so he changed the tire.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, who? And these things have happened to me in the past, where people just out of the blue open up a new road for me, a new path, and I do want to see this experience, this near-death experience. I think I can. I have the right to call it that. I want to look at it as a new path, as more information that I'm being given, that's being downloaded, that I need to take into consideration. Well, real quickly, I was admitted by a series of gentlemen that were able to make split-second decisions. They could see that I was very quickly losing the ability to breathe. It was happening so very rapidly. Of course, I was, well, consciousness, we can talk about this a bit. Consciousness, I've been thinking about this so much, has so many levels to it. And I'm not a hierarchy person per se, because I think you can get into a lot of trouble getting into hierarchies. But and I definitely don't like terms like you need to raise your vibration and such terms like that. But I do think that it's very, very, very important to think about that consciousness exists in many different ways. And so, like when you say someone is unconscious, that that's similar to a coma, But a coma is a slightly more intense version of unconsciousness. You could be knocked on the toboggan and fall unconscious for a couple of minutes, and that's not the same thing as being in a coma. But uh, back in back in 2012, when the world was supposed to end, I was also hospitalized, and that during that time I had profound shamanic journeys that were very intense, that lasted for many days. I was completely gone for weeks. I was in the hospital for a month.
Wow.
That time, yeah. This time, I don't remember any shamanic visits by anyone, um, but I was admitted very rapidly, and not only admitted, but they made decisions, very intense decisions. They inserted a breathing tube immediately. One down my throat and one through my nose, and also, I suppose, going into my lungs, and then a feeding tube, which I'm told I put a great stink up about that feeding tube.
I'm sure.
I fought it like all hell, and they finally had to take it out.
Wow.
So yeah, I don't remember any of that.
Probably better that you don't remember it.
I think so.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and they took X-rays, and so they told my wife that I was within 10 minutes of death, within 10 minutes of like complete shutdown of
Holy
my
shit.
yeah of the whole breathing thing.
Because
So
your body just couldn't breathe on its own anymore.
no, it's fascinating, no?
Wow.
That yeah, I and with the decline in consciousness, it's so fascinating that that night, just a few hours before, I was making decisions, um, uh, also packing another bag for another trip to the to the first um, uh, public emergency room. But yeah, I was making these normal day-to-day decisions, like what book do I want to read while I'm in the hospital, and then within 3 hours, I'm within 10 minutes away of being stone dead.
Jesus. So if you weren't in the hospital, you probably would be dead.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so that scares the shit out of me, and it's really had a profound effect to realize how close I am to death, and I don't want to be that close. Um, I like to think that I still have a lot more work to do with my life, and I do have specific goals that I do want to accomplish. But the only other thing I'd like to say about the little hospital visit was uh, they could not um, defeat, to use a word from my new book, um, the germ that I had. Uh, they couldn't get me back to a real good, stable place. They were keeping me from dying, and I was definitely stabilized. Um, but uh, and I can't say I was 100% stabilized. Uh, I wonder how much I was there. You know, they say that the unconscious is always listening, that it's always recording uh, every every minute of our lives, um, and so they had to do something drastic. And well, I'd like to say that I did finally become somewhat conscious in this hospital. Uh, it was like opening your eyes in the morning after sleeping. Uh, there was much light. I could recognize that it was now day. And I saw my wife looking at me. And I tried to speak to her, and I realized I could not speak. And of course, I immediately felt panic. Why can't I speak? But I experienced this in 2012, so I didn't like freak out, panic. I figured, well, I'm really sick, um, and so my first motion was this. Um, I was trying to say to her, "Where am I?" Excuse me, and very quickly she caught on to how I was communicating, and she explained as best as she could uh, the events of the last several hours. No, it's not. Excuse me, it's several days. But for me, I guess it seemed like several hours. Um, yeah, I thought I was just waking up that same 24-hour cycle, but no, it was like 3 days that I had been in there, and I kept gnawing away at something that was in my mouth that was annoying me. I had no idea what that was, and that was the breathing tube. Um, but that took my wife a while to explain. Uh, I was very concerned that maybe they had given me a tracheotomy, and I certainly didn't want to go through life with a tracheotomy. Um, so uh, I thought I had a tracheotomy. Um, that communication with my wife wasn't going so well. But anyway, so they decided to bring in the big guns, and in this case, it was something called aspiration, and it was basically they were going to vacuum my lungs to get out all the gunk out of my lungs, and I had somewhat made friends with a nurse there who who had the same name as my stepdaughter, um, and it's a very extremely rare name. So um, uh, we hit it off right away, and I knew I was in for something serious when she looked at me and she said to me very quietly, "This is not going to be easy." And
The recovery process.
no. There's
Oh,
the aspiration,
Oh, yes,
the
yes.
vacuuming of my
Yeah.
lungs.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, that could be anywhere from mildly unpleasant to very unpleasant. But I've had lots of procedures done in my life, and so I asked, well, can I have uh, anesthesia? And this seemed to be like I was asking like a big question, and all sorts of people were conferring about this and talking about this, and um, but no one was speaking to me directly. Um, they they would talk about something, tell my wife, and then my wife would explain to me. Um, but and you have to remember, I was in a Mexican hospital, so they were all speaking Spanish, but a great many people there spoke English, which was good. Um, but what I want to say is that at no time did they ask for my consent to do this procedure.
The aspiration.
Yes.
Yeah.
At no time did a doctor, through a translator or through my wife, um, attempt to explain to me the procedure, what would be involved, and yes, and my consent, and also talk to me about anesthesia. Um, because I've had like, I knew they had to put something down my throat, and I've had something called a bronchoscopy in the past, where they look at your lungs, and I've had that procedure done twice. And at first, they just spray a little something to kill the gag reflex, and then they also put a little I don't know, probably Valium in the your IV to get you a little high. Um, I remember a nurse saying, "You're going to feel a little Woodstocky now." I thought, oh, she's a hip hippie. Uh,
Hopefully, it's not the brown acid.
oh, right. Uh, yeah.
Wow. Jesus
So
Christ.
um, finally, I was told that I could not, unfortunately, be given any kind of anesthetic for this procedure because it required my participation. So I thought, well, okay.
And you're going to participate by screaming, or
Yeah.
what the fuck are you supposed to do in that situation? Sing along?
Yes. Well, die along, really. It was, Chris, it was so horrible.
Oh, I can imagine.
It was so fucking horrible. I can't begin to explain to you. I never ever in my life want to go through this again. In fact, after I had this thing done, I made my wife swear that she would never make me go through this again, um, with without my consent. And as of now, she did not have my consent to ever um, put me through this. And I think what happened, I've looked on the internet uh, for this test procedure. Um, and I was shocked because, yeah, I could find a lot of references to the procedure, the basics of it, but I could not find any of the tools that they used and they used a very special new package of tools. It's obviously prepared for this procedure. But I scoured the internet and I could not find the specific tools. And also, I was very surprised that from chat group to chat group that I went through, I belong to various support groups because I have something called sarcoidosis, and that's a potentially fatal illness. It's probably immune system related. The doctors can generally can control it, but they can't cure it. It's not infectious. It's not contagious. But I unfortunately am in the 5% of the population that could die from it. And so many of the doctors think that this is what was happening to me, is that the sarcoidosis was attacking my lungs, a place that sarcoidosis normally does attack. It likes to attack the lungs, heart, that area. And so anyway, horrible story short. A large, very large man, about the size of a professional Mexican wrestler, walked into the room, and he was young too. I checked to see if I could take this guy. Really, I knew why he was there. Obviously,
to hold you down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. He wasn't wearing high heels or a nurse's uniform or anything like that. He was ready for business, and already I had my hands on the rails of the bed, and I was gripping them because I knew I had to prepare for a shock of some sort. So I was gripping them, and so he placed his hand over my hand, not comfortingly, but like to hold me down. And I felt the force, not in a Star Wars type force, but a professional wrestler. Yeah,
yes.
him.
Yeah.
And so then the lovely procedure began. I thought I was going to have at least a measure of control. No. Immediately, all of my attention went to my hand. Everything was, I have to get this guy's hand off of my hand. What do I know to do this? I've studied Aikido. I was a wrestler in high school. So I know various methods to break the grip of someone when they're holding you. And so within seconds, I was able to break the grasp of this gigantic monster.
Wow.
Yeah, which I felt rather proud about. But that's when I began more or less to become aware of a more sensational type of pain than I had been while I was wrestling this hombre to get off of me. I heard my wife begin to scream from the back of the room. He's turning red. He's turning red. Can't you see that? And at about the time she began to scream, I began to do they call it the hanged man's jig. Uh, when uh, when they hang a fellow, if they don't, or a person, a human being, if they don't immediately break your neck, um, the person begins to do a dance, trying to move their legs. Well, it's a process uh, of being unable to breathe, asphyxiated. But it go. So I began to do this motion with my legs, and then it went into like a full stage type of convulsion movement. But I was conscious through it all, and hearing my wife screaming, seeing my legs moving totally and out of control without. It was the most horrible thing that I've ever seen in my life.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
How long did it last?
Well, they did 2 rounds of it. I heard somebody say, "Okay, that was good. We got a lot. Okay, let's do another." And same thing. The guy puts his hand again on me. I battle him off, and again I go into this hanged man's dance, and my wife screaming. This time she said that I turned the color of red wine. So immense uh, quantities of adrenaline must have been released in my body. It was fighting for its life. Now, um, I immediately posted next day on Facebook to my friends privately, what the fuck happened to me? Because I have some friends who are doctors, some who are nurses, various in the medical field, and they said this sounds like malpractice. Um, this this sounds like a absolute. I forget the words they were using, but that it was not done properly, and that's been basically what I've been able to conclude, because I wrote to a friend about this, and he said, "Oh, I had this." And so I said, "How was it for you?" And he said, "It was unpleasant. They put me on a table, and then they rotated the table 180 degrees, uh, completely different method, or very different than what I had." And I said, "Was there any pain or discomfort?" Mild discomfort. He said, "The dentist is worse, much worse. Filling is much worse."
Wow.
And then I thought, oh, so then my mind went back to people saying that this is malpractice, that you never gave informed consent, you were conscious, you could communicate, you could write. I was writing messages to my wife, questions. Um, and the last thing I wrote very clearly before the procedure, it was, I want anesthesia. I want anesthesia.
That's a long
Um,
word to have to spell quickly.
yeah, yeah, and properly in that state of dreamy consciousness that I was in, and to hold the pen steady. We certainly weren't in any. She didn't have any board or something that would be easy for me to write a message on. I was writing in a small notebook that she carries with her. But bless her heart, my God, Chris, we spoke about the pain, but um, in Gnosticism, a lot of people speak about how horrible this earth is, and they say that we're living in a black iron prison, um, and they make reference to many of the horrible things that are happening around the world, and I certainly do not argue with the fact that uh, incredibly tragic things happen, and yeah, I'm here to attest to this horrible experience I had in the hospital. But at the same time, the amount of love that I felt from my wife, I have never felt so loved in all my life. And for me, this was, and I want to use this word with all its beauty, revelation, a revelation of love to me. Uh, she stayed awake basically 22 hours or more every day. Uh, yeah, they when I was unconscious those first few days, they were sending her out because the hospital didn't have all the medicines that I needed. Um, and so she had to go out in the middle of the night um, in areas that were dangerous in Mexico. Luckily, many times she was able to travel with friends or other women that she met at the hospital. But she had to go search pharmacy after pharmacy for a pharmacy that was open at that hour and a pharmacy that had this particular bizarre medicine.
She had to go looking for the medicine?
Yes. It was the Welcome to Mexico.
Wow.
They had certain medicines there, but they don't have everything, and that's another like kind of a welcome to your near death experience kind of thing. That well, you're welcome to lay here, and we will do all that we can do. But if you can't find this medicine, we can't do anything else. Yeah,
What the fuck? Why didn't they have people go out and look for the medicine? Like, that's so insane.
yeah.
Like,
I
like your wife doesn't have anything else better to do but than to go around town in dangerous areas and go looking for medicine that the hospital should have in the first place.
Well, I would think so. Yeah,
That's insane.
yeah. To put some another person's life at risk, send a woman, um, a very petite um, woman, out in the middle of the night, um, and to go from pharmacy to pharmacy. Uh, it's unbelievable. But I don't want to get too far away from this point of that there is unbelievable beauty in the world, and I really was able to feel that and experience that, and during this time, I actually witnessed a mother die in front of me.
Wow.
Yes, and she was with her daughter at the time, and she had been in the hospital for a month or so, and it, it appeared serious to me, her condition, but I didn't realize it was that serious. Um, and they were they belonged to I think a unique Jewish I don't know if sect is the right word, but they after their mother died, they they walked through the hospital. Now, my knowledge of Jewish death tradition is not very deep, so maybe this is part of the tradition. But it seemed more like a shamanic looking for her soul, or gathering her soul. What do they call rescuing her soul in shamanism? Because for the next 2 or 3 days, two daughters took turns walking through all the aisles of the hospital and in and out of the room, and going up to the bed where she died. And it was like they were looking for her soul. It was very profound, very moving,
Wow.
very mysterious. And I, at the time, promised myself to investigate this. I have not yet done that, but I still plan to do that, because this was most mysterious. And then there was stages of removing well, first making the bed that she died on, and then removing bit by bit all the sheets and uh, uh, I don't know the words in English, but so that was mysterious. And then finally, when they made the bed, one nurse put a coin on the bed. I think that's a Jewish tradition. No,
The tipping of the guardian angel.
it is.
I'm being. That was a bad joke. Yeah.
Well, it's like paying the boatman.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah. It's they say the Shroud of Turin, that that it's very possible that Jesus has coins
Mm-hmm.
on his eyes,
Yeah.
or whoever that is on the shroud.
Yeah.
But yeah, that this custom of paying the boatman goes way back into history.
And so, how recent was all of this?
Well, this has been like maybe 2 months, because it has continued, and not always in pleasant ways. Um, I had to return to see all the different specialists to make sure that I'm 100% cured and everything's all right. And they have given me a clean bill of health.
Fantastic.
Yes, they say that my not just say, but I could see my oxygen levels is fantastic. Um, and I've been doing. I studied a form of Neo-Reichian breath work. So, have you ever done any kind of body work therapy?
I haven't. I
Uh,
mean, I have had a couple of sessions of Reichian therapy, but I
oh,
didn't.
you have?
Yeah, it
Oh,
wasn't like breath work. It was more like swinging a tennis racket and making strange expressions and beating a pillow and stuff like that.
oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
Well, the Reichian therapy, I heard, can get very physical.
Yeah. Sure.
Uh,
Because of all the character, the body armor, or what is it called?
yeah, body armor.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
body armoring. Yeah, the segments.
Hmm.
I think they're the seven, like the chakras, that Wilhelm Reich um, noticed. And yes, this new forum, I'll give it a plug. It's called radix, and I do very much recommend it. I participated in it. It's, in the radix education for about a year, and it was funny. We went to do this in a yoga center every week, and so the yoga center, of course, was very, very peaceful, and they had incense and soft music playing, and we would be in this room screaming and crying and laughing and making all sorts of noises, but really just screaming for our dear life and crying like babies. It was incredible,
Yeah,
incredible stuff.
when the Reichian therapist that I went to, her office was at the rear part of the building that her husband's architectural firm was in. So she had like
Oh,
2 feet of concrete that surrounded the whole room that she was in.
ah,
Soundproofing, yeah, which was very, as you know, very well needed.
yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Well, it's yeah, I remember when my therapist asked me, do I have permission to put my thumb on the roof of your mouth? Okay, let's go for it. Well,
Again, oh.
yeah, like the same old thing every week.
I'm getting
Yes,
desensitized to it.
right, the same boring questions. Like, how does that make you feel?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah,
But
you know, and
it was effective, right?
yes,
Yeah.
yes, they it cured my phobia of supermarkets.
Hmm.
I had this uh, it cured strange phobias that I had. I don't know how much good it did overall for me. I'd like to think it did some good, but it did help me very much. Previously, I always felt very self-conscious when walking into one of those immense supermarkets that have everything besides food that you could possibly want,
Yeah.
snowmobiles and TVs and that kind of store. I just always felt like so self-conscious in these massive places, and the radix cured me of that. I didn't ask. I didn't. That was wasn't one of my presenting like difficulties when I went to the therapy.
But it ended up covering that.
Yeah. Right, like
Cool.
a bonus, like everybody's into like giving bonuses, and like if you pay for my book or my yeah, it's like, well, I've heard that this is like rule number one of good business. Uh, I actually took a business course when I was younger, like a cassette course, uh, and it said to always give more than you're receiving. And I made that my life's. I I don't know what word I would say, but my method of working, that whenever I would play piano for a dance class, I would always play to the full extent of my abilities. I was working for one uh, university, and the head of the dance program said to me one day, Larry, you realize that these kids are just in the physical education program in this class. Uh, all the students in the physical education program had to take one dance class to get their degree, And she says, "You don't have to play with so much energy. Just relax and just tinkle the keys." And I said, like, okay, thanks, but I can't do that. I don't know how to. I just took this advice to heart, and I don't know how to give like just 90% or something like that.
It's good.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's good to give your all, definitely, even when it's not required. Maybe even more in those instances, because then, people, maybe there were a few people who got something out of it that didn't expect to get something out of it. And because you
Yeah,
gave that extra bit, they were
there
able
you
to walk
go.
away with something. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I
You
want
never know.
let's get into this book. Let's get
Oh,
into alien parasites. We've got a lot of ground to cover,
mm,
and the book is vast in and of itself. And
thank you,
yeah, I was very
thank you,
impressed by
Chris.
it. Yes, and it was a book that originally came out in Spanish, right?
Yes,
Mhm.
yes. I thought, since I'm living here in Mexico, um, and I want to communicate my knowledge of my esoteric knowledge with people here. Uh, I should I should communicate in Spanish, um, and because you can find in the wealthier areas of Mexico City, and even the city I was living in previously, um, you can find a whole, like, for instance, school that everyone knows English. Um, so some people here were asking me why I didn't write it in English. Mexicans were asking me why I didn't write it in English, but I had thought to myself, no, I want to reach the the normal person on the street, the average person on the street. Uh, and someone just asked me the other day about my title, Alien Parasites: 40 Gnostic Truths to Defeat the Archon Invasion. And she was telling me that she loves my book, and that she's really received a lot from my writings. And I was deeply touched by this, what she said. But she said that the title disturbed her, and why did I choose this type of title? And I wrote back to her, and I said that I put a lot of thought into this, because uh, I have I have read quite a few books on the subject of Gnosticism, and so many of them that are out there are written by academics. They're they're really good books, but they come at the subject from an academic level, and even when they're trying their best not to be academic, they're still using vocabulary and yeah, vocabulary and basic principles of philosophy, theology, that only if you have a university education would you know. Um, and so I thought to myself, this is, I don't want to just put out another book that is going to be cited in another academic book or in another academic paper, and I don't know, that someone can go to a academic conference and Tahiti and read about my book. No, I wanted to reach like the whole world. I wanted to reach like everybody here first. That's why I wrote it in Spanish, and then everybody was saying you have to write it in English. You have to translate your own book because I wrote it. I started writing it in English, and then my wife helped me to translate it into Spanish. And so when I began to write in English again, it was interesting. It was wonderful because I had the manuscript anew in my hands. It was like a new opportunity. Like, okay, where do I want to take this manuscript now? How can I make it more impactful? How can how can I make it better? And I found many ways to make it better. So I think writing it first in Spanish was great because I think I finally was able to write a better book because of that. And as far as the title, I was explaining to this fan who had written to me. I said that, well, for example, like in Star Wars, what's his name? George Lucas was able to bring to all of movie-going humanity the hero's journey and help them to live it and see it. And J.R.R. Tolkien did the same with The Lord of the Rings. And I believe he also profoundly taught about who the Christ is. I think he reveals in the Lord of the Rings who the Christ is, and I said that both these men never once had to use the word Christ, Christian, spirituality, or anything like that. They didn't have to talk about the hero's journey the way you'll see it presented in an academic book or in that fashion. They presented it in an exciting way, in an impactful way, in a way that could reach the public, humanity. So that's my goal. I said to her, if I needed to set off a flash grenade, several flash grenades, to draw attention to this book, I'll do it. To get people's attention, alien parasites is a heck of a title. Like, what the hell are alien parasites? And is this a fucking book about science fiction? Is it and it's 40 Gnostic truths to defeat the Archon invasion? And where is this guy coming from? Is this is he like really sincere in writing this with like a kind of almost a comic book title? But yes, there is an invasion that is happening, and I believe that a lot of what has been happening to me, especially in the last 2 weeks, last 2 months, has been the result of these beings called archons. And because there is a train of thought in Gnosticism that that there are beings who cannot physically manifest on the planet Earth, but can influence one's energy. They can feed off your energy. Like I'm sure most of your listeners are familiar with energy vampires, and know people, have met people in their lives that were energy vampires. So this is something that is very, very profound. There is a battle going on, battles going on in the middle of a gigantic war over the face of this earth and in this solar system and in this galaxy. And Gnosticism is a way to actually travel to the heart of God. Gnosis, that's where this word Gnosticism comes from. Gnosis is a direct knowing, a direct perception of the divinity. It's not believing. You do not need to believe in the air to breathe. We just take for granted that we have air. As someone riding down the street on a motorcycle doesn't need to have faith that he's on a motorcycle or she's on a motorcycle. She knows she's on a motorcycle. And that's the same thing with Gnostics. They don't need anyone to tell them what to believe. They don't need a book of dogma. They don't need a rule book. They don't need play-by-play to tell them who God is, what God wants, because they're having this experience, this profound experience that transcends religion, that transcends all these, that transcends philosophies, that transcends teachings. And you know, the funny thing, Chris, is that so many people don't want to take this journey. They'd rather prefer the books, the rule books. They prefer someone telling them, well, this is the way it is, and this is what you have to believe. One of the beautiful things about Gnosticism is that no one tells you what to believe, and I make it very clear in my book that I am sharing what I see, what are my experiences from the gnosis that I have, that I'm sharing, but I will in no way state that the gnosis of another person must conform word for word to my gnosis, and because there are a million different ways to express something, a million different ways to play a middle C in music, and a million different, well, an infinite amount of instruments that can play that middle C, that can vibrate that middle C and give its own particular sound. Like, for instance, when a saxophone is playing a C note, or yeah, and when a piano is playing it, or a flute, immediately you can identify, oh, that's a flute, that's a guitar, that's a banjo, that's a saxophone, but they're all playing one note, the middle C. So many different vibrations and many different ways to depict one truth. But yes, in many Gnostic belief systems, there is a ultimate reality, and they do not. The Gnostics, they're really stubborn when it comes to giving this reality a name, because they don't want to name it. To name it would be to automatically kind of define it, to chop it up, and
place limits on it, maybe.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah. We can go in any direction with this, like yeah. Any word has its dictionary definition. I remember Terence McKenna telling a beautiful story about a young boy who's just learning to speak, and one morning, what's the name of it? A hummingbird, colibri in Espanol. A hummingbird flies into his bedroom, and he is transfixed at this revelation that has flown into his bedroom. And he's just looking with awe at this beautiful hummingbird. And eventually he calls his mother, Ma, Ma. She comes in and he says, what is that? And she says, it's a hummingbird. And then forever, that experience, that moment has been now like placed in like permanent, like plastic, I don't know what, acrylic. And it will take a hell of a lot of doing to liberate that experience, or liberate that little boy to open up his mind again to actually see a hummingbird.
Yes, that's a great example. So
Yeah.
for the listeners who aren't necessarily well versed in Gnosticism, there is it has the Gnostic cosmology and the Christian cosmology. There's overlap there, but where do the Gnostics differ in their view of the universe or reality or the cosmos? What do they see as their place in it?
Well, I'll try to give you a rough triptych through this world, because it's a little complicated when you're even speaking about the Gnostics, because this name Gnostic only came into use, I believe, was in the 1700s. So the Gnostics didn't call themselves Gnostics.
Sure.
And there were people who were working in these groups that today we call Gnostic, that predate Christianity. So it goes back to Egypt. It has roots in Egypt. It has roots in Greek uh, thought and teachings, the Greek mysteries um, are very much involved in all of this. Uh, Judaism plays a very, very big role in the formation of many Gnostic groups. Um, and like I was saying before, um, there is no official Gnosticism. And unfortunately, we have down here, well, it's a movement now. It was founded by a man who was a type of charlatan. He realized that a good 50 years ago or so, a good many of the esoteric books had not been translated into Spanish. So he just basically took these books, changed them up a little bit, and put a new Spanish title on it. It said this is Gnosticism, and wrote his name. And his name is Samael Anwar. And I hesitate to give his name out, but like they say, you have to give the devil his due. And so, yeah, unfortunately, this man developed a cult, and it's still very much alive and well in Mexico, Colombia, and many other countries in South America. And now, unfortunately, it's moving up into the United States. So that's why I'm saying his name, because now in the United States, it's coming for you guys. This false gnosis, and it's absolutely incredible. I don't remember how I got onto this subject of this fellow. But you asked me a question. Did I?
Oh, I was asking. I think that maybe there are listeners that don't know a lot about Gnosticism, but maybe they know just enough to know that it's somehow related to Christianity. What
Oh,
what
yeah,
would be
yes,
what I mean, Gnostics are seen basically as the kind of the anarchists of the Christian cosmology, right? They believe that
yeah.
it's all about direct experience of the divine. You shouldn't need to go through any institution or figurehead,
Or
right?
yes, yeah, no intermediary. Um, yes, that your experience of the Christ is your experience of the Christ, and uh, no no priest is going to be able to uh, give you this experience. Certainly, there are people that can help you, point you in the right direction, but ultimately, you have to walk this path yourself. Um, at the very beginning of Christianity, we have been led to believe that Christianity was one big kind of unified uh, group of people, that they were the followers of Jesus, people who had heard Jesus speak, or who had heard the apostles speaking, and certainly there were all sorts of Christian groups all around. But we have to remember that not until approximately 300 AD was any attempt made to bring together all the teachings, all the beliefs into one place and one central authority. And we must remember who did that. It was the Roman Empire. It was a political organization, an empire, and an emperor who actually said that, okay, now we're going to decide what is Christianity. So that gives about 300 years from the time of Christ for all sorts of groups to have existed, for all sorts of gospels to have been written, for all sorts of people who knew Jesus and were expressing what they took away from their interaction with Jesus. I prefer to call him the Christ, or who had interactions with apostles. And so basically everything, the roof blew off completely in around 1947.
The Nag Hammadi Library, is that where you're going?
There you go. Yep.
What is that, and what role did it have in all this?
This farmer, you might want to call him, in Egypt, who lived near a town called Nag Hammadi, was out looking for fertilizer in a cave one day with his brother, and he came upon a very ancient jar, a huge jar, and when he was able to get it out of the soil, he opened it up, and he saw that it was filled with books, old books, and these guys of the desert are smart cookies. They knew that there's hidden treasures in the desert. So he thought, man, it could have value. Who knows? It was only going to blow Christianity into like 1 billion pieces, and we need now to I don't know, recover from this the shock of the explosion. But yes, to suddenly have like dozens of gospels and epistles, letters written by the apostles, and all new text. It's incredible. What happened with this guy? He brought the big jar home. His mother saw it, and she thought, oh, well, I can use this paper. It's like newspaper. I can use it for to cook breakfast with.
To put in the Boyd cage.
Yeah, yes, exactly. I need newspaper. So she used some of the gospels to light the fire. So eventually, a few were sold and moved from here to there, and it's really a sordid story. A lot of people looking to get rich quick and make a buck. Um, but bit by bit, they found their ways into scholars' hands. And this is where scholars are very, very useful, just like a doctor is very, very useful when you break your leg. Um, and in my case, I don't think they knew exactly what they were doing when they were vacuuming my lungs. Um, Actually, I think probably I had a student doctor who was doing that. It is a teaching uh, hospital. So, but it can be very, very helpful to have someone who is wise in this way to help you. But then you have to read the Gnostic Gospel and uh, don't just go out there and listen to a podcast about Gnosticism and read books about it. Go and read the Nag Hammadi library. Have your experience. This is your time, your opportunity. Um, like you can take the ticket. It's like being offered to you to travel, and and it is available for free on the internet in various translations. So and that's not difficult to find. So I don't need to hold your hand to do that, and uh, also to find the Nag Hammadi library. Uh, uh, you can go to Amazon and you can find various excellent translations and just dive in. Um, I My introduction to it was I think around well late 80s, 1990, somewhere around there. I was at a neo-pagan Wiccan convention festival called Starwood, and where half the people were dancing wildly to around fires but experiencing their gnosis and expressing their gnosis. Another thing, many of the Gnostics were very sexual. So, and then there were Gnostics who avoided all sex because, like I was saying earlier, there are Gnostic teachings that this world is so horrible, woe is me type of attitude. But generally, I found in my studies that the Gnostics were very much full of life, and like you were saying, Chris, that they kind of you play music, right? You're a musician.
I have dabbled. We'll say that. Yeah, I have a
Yeah.
couple of CDs out, but I can't
Do
sit on
you?
I can't sit on a porch and jam. I use sequencers to make several layers of plunking around actually sound like I sort of know what I'm doing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we'll get there.
Well, that's a revelation. Okay. Um, well, it's these Gnostic masters and of both sexes uh, were able to take stories about, well, for instance, the Magdalene, Mary Magdalene, and and Christ, and just like a jazz musician would just riff off them, just jam with them, and see what emotions and insights they have as they're exploring. Um, uh, and they were like the beat poets. They were the jazz poets, um, the rap artists, um, just creating something absolutely new. They didn't want desperately didn't want the gospel to sink into cement, and because we know that's what it always happens, that the revelation descends, and it descends more and more and more, and it's put into a box and with more and more locks, uh,
It becomes
and
concretized, and then stigma comes from that.
that's there you go, yes, yeah, and then there's people who are defending must defend that. So either you're in our group or you're not in our group. So just, yeah, like after 300, and the Roman Empire says that the official religion of the Roman Empire is Christianity, and we are formulating the Nicene Creed and they uh, it was through a series of councils. A lot of people think it was only this Nicaea council that everything was settled, but no, it was through several different emperors over less than 100 years, I'd say, except for the last book talking about Revelation. Um, a, that didn't make it fully into the Bible until around the year 500, but all the rest of them were in there officially before that. Um, and so when they had their official Bible, when the emperor was together with the all the bishops that he could collect, and they had decided what were the correct gospels. And it's unbelievable when you crack open the Nag Hammadi Codex. That's another word for um, or the Nag Hammadi Library. When you open up this book, you're just overwhelmed at the wealth of gospels and epistles and various letters and such of whatnot that are contained in it. It's a bottomless fountain of wisdom.
And
And go
sorry,
ahead.
go. No, I thought you were done. Go, please.
Well, no, it's just that this. I'm just going back to that. My urging that you have this experience for yourself, because um, all these a group of bishops coming together with a politically minded emperor, a series of politically minded emperors, whose goal was it to reunite the Roman Empire. And the Roman Empire, they were always very, very smart. They knew how to do things, basically. Uh, we know from our history, from our movies and whatnot, that usually they didn't force people to change their religion. Like in Palestine, they did not force the Jewish people to believe in the Roman gods. In fact, the Romans did the opposite. They would always uh, take the new gods, bring them to Rome, and say, well, okay, this one looks like our god Zeus or Jupiter, and they would, we see the Greek and the Roman pantheon lined up it lines up almost perfectly. And they did this with the pantheons of all the peoples they conquered. Um, and But then with Constantine, they seem to go off into this new angle of the one true religion. This was something that was very new and different in the world. That never before, except for very, very few times, like with Akhenaten in Egypt, was there teaching that there's this one God, um, and uh, but I know you wanted to ask a question. I don't want you to lose that.
I'm not going to lose it. But it's well timed since you boiled it down to the one God. One of the more revolutionary concepts that's in the Nag Hammadi library, right, is that everybody is actually paying attention to the wrong God.
Yeah, that's an ass kicker there. The demiurge.
Yes.
And what's so damn funny is that he's known by three names in the Nag Hammadi library. It reveals his three names. Yaldabaoth is one. Saklas is another. And Samael is a third. And it's very interesting that this man who came from Colombia and moved to Mexico and started putting out all these books about Gnosticism in air quotes. He named himself Samael, the name of the demiurge. What better way to announce to everybody, stay away, warning, this is who I am. I'm revealing, I'm giving you one last chance. It's in the name, folks. See, just read the name and you get the picture and you know what's happening.
And only the idiots will be left.
Yeah, it's sad to say, but come on, it's like there. You can read it, and I know about this the balancing both sides of the triangle and creating the balance and everything. But yeah, the basic idea is the Gnostics looked back and read the old books of the Old Testament, and they saw, wait a minute, who is this Jehovah that he's actually telling the Jewish people to go out and slaughter everyone in this city and kill all the women and the trees too. He has something against trees. Well, the thing was that that was his what's the word? It's escaping me at the moment, but his partner, Asherah. There was a time when Judaism did have a god and a goddess, and it was very beautiful that that Yahweh had Asherah, and Asherah was a very, very powerful goddess of the Middle East, and she appears to us in many different forms, Ishtar, Inanna, but it all goes back to the same goddess. And but anyway, there was a time in the development of the Jewish religion when a group of individuals decided that the Asherah had to leave, But it's amazing that if you do even a peripheral study of the Jewish history, that people like Solomon had statues to Asherah in the temple of Jerusalem. They were worshiping the goddess. And we can see as we read the Bible, the Old Testament, that every time the Jewish people got into a jam, a real big jam, they always pulled out their old goddesses and gods from previous cultures and times where they had lived either in slavery or whatnot. And so, the connection, Asherah was traditionally worshipped in groves of trees. And so that is something that I just want to urge people to do, is to, if you can, just meditate with trees, meditate in nature, read your Nag Hammadi book out in nature, and your other books on Gnosticism. I hope you buy mine. And thanks, Chris, many thanks for allowing me to plug my book on your wonderful show.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
But yes, so the Gnostics gradually realized that by observing the behavior of this Jehovah person, and I have quotes in my book directly from the Bible, when it comes to like making my point, I don't want it to be unclear. So in the book, I am very clear with quotes, with exact references, so people can see in no uncertain terms what I'm referring to. But when I say that they saw a God that was very legalistic, that was very easily prone to wrath, that was easily prone to violence, acts of terrible violence, even against his own people. So the Gnostic said, this can't be God. This if it is God, it is a God, but it is not the God. It is not the ultimate reality. And so some Gnostics do like to go in that direction and see that and teach that everything began from a primal unity, a primal oneness, and that this primal oneness gradually became expressed itself in various forms. It first, in some Gnostic stories, it manifested itself in male and female, not in man and woman, but in a male and female sense, a kind of polarity, connection. And in many of the Gnostic groups that formed early on, there are sets of hierarchies, and some are very, very beautiful, and extremely well thought out. I mean, there were some Gnostics who, in their gnosis, in their revelation that they were having, believed that God expressed himself through number. Others taught that God expressed himself through music. And forgive me for saying himself. It's I would love to say the absolute and the unknowable, but these words are new to us, and each of us has to break ourselves in our own way, because I know I myself at times in the past became a little uncomfortable with, well, damn it, give me a name. I need a name. Yeah, I can understand that you're talking about that that the divine reality wanted to express itself in this manner, but I want to have my experience, my own gnosis, and so I continued reading um, the Nag Hammadi library, and uh, it, Gnosticism is a little bit like I'd like to use the analogy of hunting, but I'm not a hunter and I don't believe in it. But maybe the analogy of that's often used by the Sufis, that goddess is like a shy woman, and that you have to really work hard to get her to come out of the forest where she's hiding, to reveal herself to you, to make herself known to you. You have to woo her. You have to seduce her. You have to win her. And that's why I find so beautiful the works of Tolkien and some of the work of C.S. Lewis, because sometimes through analogy, sometimes like Jesus would teach through parables. That's the only way that sometimes we can grasp that is kind of ungraspable. And that's why the Gnostics had so many tiers of beings. It's because it's more and more, as you look up, it gets more and more ineffable. And that's why I love looking at trees. I like looking at tall trees blowing in the wind and their leaves moving back and forth. Whatever does it for you. That's what Gnosticism is about. And yeah, it's and Gnosticism speaks about wisdom, and this is where the goddess comes in. Her name is Sophia, and there are whole books in the Bible. Well, there is a whole book, the Book of Wisdom, that is devoted to Sophia. And many of the old Jewish patriarchs and the prophets spoke about Sophia and wisdom. And sometimes they couched it in very sexual terms, very, very explicit romantic sexual terms. And Christ is in who Paul spoke about the the bride, the bride of Christ. Anyway, this being by the name of Sophia comes into being, and in many Gnostic systems, she goes all the way back to the very beginning. But you can take your Gnosticism as you wish, and let's just meet with her as she's existing in as what were known as the aeons. She's an aeon. And the aeons were these exalted beings. They were like swirling vortices of energy that moved. And the Gnostics actually had a place for this. They called it the pleroma. They said it was in the middle of our galaxy. And I think this is so fascinating because what did the Aztecs say? They talked about Hunab Ku, the most sacred place, the dwelling place of all the gods. And where was it located? In the center of the galaxy. If you break open your dusty 2012 books, you can read some still wonderful messages about the wisdom of the Aztecs and how they somehow knew that the galaxy had a center, and they saw this as the vagina of reality. And so here dwells in the pleroma these pairs, divine pairs of male and female energy. Again, I'm not saying man and woman. I'm not. Gnosticism has nothing against the LGBTQ community, and I think Gnosticism is a religion that can be embraced by those people who dwell on the threshold between the shamans always dwelt between the worlds, and the shamans dressed as women, very very often male shamans dressed as women, and vice versa, because they wanted to explore that liminal quality, that quality of being. The limen is the place that's not outside your house, it's not inside your house. So you have to, it's the threshold that you step over as you enter the house. So it's not quite in one world, not quite in the other. And but organized religion wants to, like you said, Chris, concretize things and put it into that perpetual plastic that and unfortunately that's what we see with many of these academics too, that they are we have a wonderful Gospel of Mary Magdalene. Can you imagine that? It's in the Nag Hammadi library. You can read it tonight, right after you watch this podcast, and you can go read the Gospel of Mary Magdalene for yourself. And there's a wonderful new book written by a scholar about this, and on a few pages she has some really powerful, wonderful things to say. a lot of it is you have to get through the academic stuff, and well, that's well all and good for academics, but not all the world are, not everyone are academics. I don't know if that's good English or not.
You're definitely not one.
Yeah, right, right. Well,
And I that's a compliment coming from me. I'm just kidding anyway. Well, so okay, so how do the archons fit in this cosmology, and why are they not our friends?
well, uh, in in Judaism, they have something called the Kabbalah, and for those of you who have studied Kabbalah, know that that as the divine energy descended during creation, that certain parts of the creation could not contain the energy completely, and so exploded. And in this explosion, shards of this explosion, pieces of the junk of this explosion fell down, uh, and and looking at things through the lens of the Kabbalah and Judaism, that they believe that all these shards, all these broken pieces of the act of creation, they need to be redeemed. They need to be shown the light. Um, it's that's just one way of looking at it. That as this incredible divine energy descended, making creation, um, uh, it went into various areas, and as it explored various areas, they were not able to contain all the energy, and they exploded, and the energy continued moving down and forming more of creation. The the Gnostics, um, well, I would say that you have to be very, uh, I don't want to scare people, but you have to be very careful, because um, the many Gnostics say that evil was brought into the world through Sophia, and after speaking many names of male divinities, they begin to mention this Sophia, and on her back they put all the reason for there being problems in the world. Uh, when I say Gnostics, I'm speaking about the people who lived in the first few centuries of the Common Era, and I'm speaking about the people of today too. Some people believe in this uh, almost a literal interpretation, and that I just think is so absurd to take a Gnostic book, the very people who were trying to say, listen, people, we have to be open. We have to open our minds to what we're hearing and receiving. And we can't let this precious flower be put into a mold, put into a form that it cannot live, that it cannot breathe. Um, so I think it's kind of funny when modern day Gnostics want to just read the Nag Hammadi library and make that into a new kind of dogma. They haven't understood the game.
Silly humans.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. But we are capable of so much beauty, so much ecstasy, and if there's anything that I want to leave you all with tonight, it's that when we look at the ultimate reality, when we go way, 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 way back, and before there was anything, and look at this absolute reality that existed, and it was infinite. It was, well, I like to look at it like that. It had a consistency. It had an integrity to it, to itself. There is no way that this absolute reality could be divided against itself in any shape, form, or way, because it had to have an inner consistency. It had to be integral. To fight against itself is a contradiction in terms. It could not be absolute if it was divided against itself. So if you're stuck in that point of living in a dualistic world, then you have to ascend. I'm saying that word that I hate. You have to ascend one more step and get rid of that duality and go back to the primal unicity. Go to the primal unicity. And there you can see the primal divinity that is nameless, that is beyond all human conception, but yet at the same time, we are part of that reality. Now, I wrote a book about archons and alien parasites, and damn it, we will talk about that. It's the last thing I'll do. Because we are part of that absolute unicity, we are so fucking creative. You have no idea. Well, yeah, you, Chris, you have an idea. You wouldn't be doing this.
Oh, shucks.
Oh, heck. Yeah, well, that's that. I mean, every night we're dreaming. Every night we're dreaming. What is a dream? Think about a dream. In a dream, it's like a movie, right? It's better than a movie in a sense, because we're living in it. It's real to us while we're dreaming it. It's absolutely real. We flinch, and we see our pets actually moving in their sleep, because they're dreaming. So, but to say that it's like a book or a play, we can say that. And well, then if it's like a movie, for example, then, well, who decided on the script? Who decided what characters would be in Dream 3B of say second cycle of REM sleep? Who hired the characters, the actors? I mean, yeah, I have dreams where I see people I've never seen before. At least I don't remember them. Maybe my subconscious picked them up on the radar and stuck them in the memory vault. But yeah, when you think about all that's involved in a movie set, the cameraman, oh, it's like I love foreign film, and I love especially like the films of oh a Swedish filmmaker, Ingmar Bergman.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
absolutely.
And he had a cameraman. Do you remember his name? I
I
don't.
don't.
He was magnificent. He was absolutely fantastic. So just the camera angle. Who decides on the camera angles in your dreams? And one way there is a wonderful way to know this is it's dream analysis. It's like you ask yourself when I'm dreaming, or after the dream, or if you're not awake, conscious during the dream, lucid. After your dream, ask yourself, okay, where I was standing, what was it, flat? What what, what type of floor was I standing on? Where was I? And you have to wake up and do this. That's the only tough part about dream analysis. You always have to pay the piper, right? I mean, you have to climb the mountain to see the guru, or so you have to wake up to write down your dream, but it's worth it because you ask yourself, well, where was I? What were the angles? What were the walls like? Were they at 90-degree angles? Or and when I started doing this with my dreams, I noticed, well, at times I was in some very strange looking houses, some buildings that were very, very strangely shaped. And I myself seem to always like houses in my dreams. I have lots of buildings in my dreams, and in my father's house there are many mansions. Um, so so ask yourself, what did the floor look like? Did I feel stable on the floor? You can ask yourself, what was my role? Like if it was a play or a movie, was I the star of my dream? Was I the co-star? Was I in the cast of thousands? Was I just, like somebody that's sitting off and sipping their champagne in the corner of the room?
The caterer.
Yeah, the caterer. Um, and so, yeah, ask yourself, well, what do I have a starring role in my dreams, or am I the no, I'm not such a big star. And why is that? What's going on here in the dream that, or my dreams, in my life? The dreams are reflecting some aspect of my life, inner or outer. And so we look at this, and then we look at our lives, and but it's wonderful to just go down the list and of like who chose the angle of the camera in that scene in my dream or your dream, and the lighting, who decided if it would be day or night, and so we're all tremendously creative. That's what I want to first, and then look at, well, what do? We write books, all the millions of novels. The most I'm sure that the majority of people here just love to read and love to go to the movies. And we love creativity. We just love it. And we don't pay our musicians enough, and we don't pay our podcasters enough. And but damn it, let's begin now. And
send your daddy's checks to.
Yes, right. Go into mommy's pocketbook and get out her credit card. Yes. But we love creativity. We are immersed in creativity, even if it's the color of the dress, the suit, the cabinet, the car. What do you call it? Well, anyway, the colors of the inside of your car that you pick out, the fabric. That's what I was looking for. We make all these decisions about the creativity because we are fascinated with it, and now we're creating artificial worlds with the virtual reality, and we love this with what is it? New Life, the video game that you can create like
Second Life.
Second Life.
Yeah.
And there's this great Gnostic meaning in meditating on what is happening there with the fact that we now are taking another step. We now are creating worlds. And in the past, we did that through creating plays, and then we always loved plays, going back to the Greeks. They loved plays, definitely, and even before them. But we love beauty, and so now we are creating another. Our children, maybe. I don't know. This is very scary where this is going. It was said by, it was taught by Rudolf Steiner, that that if we have our heart in the right place with what we're doing now with the virtual reality and the artificial intelligence and so forth, if our heart is in the right place, then everything will go okay. Everything will be well. But if we begin to do this for evil reasons, if our heart is not in the right place, if we're weaponizing our gnosis, then we're getting into big trouble. So it is said that that Sophia had a vision, a dream of beings who were like the beings in the pleroma in the center of the galaxy. And she began to absolutely love, she fell in love with this dream of hers. And she went into a kind of swoon, and she, or you could call it, she made a leap of love, a love leap, and she fell out of the pleroma. And some say that she became the earth. And some say that she, in her confusion and in her shock at what had happened, her energy was intermingled with the energy of certain types of metals and ions. And this energy took on a quality that wasn't of the original intent of Sophia. Sophia had this dream of human beings, in other words, beings that exist in a matrix of earth, air, fire, and water. So they exist in this matrix. And she was able to envision this and make it a reality. But in the process, unfortunately, some of her energy was deflected by these metallic, if you will, parts of creation. And these things became like robots, if you will. They did not have any will of their own. They have no ability to create. Maybe that's the best way to put it. That creation is the key. Creation, no matter where we take ourselves through this Alice in the Looking Glass labyrinth here, if there is the flash of creation, if there's the ability to create the beautiful, then there's love. There is the good. But when you have an inability to create, only to copy, and maybe that's why Samael Anwar took that name, Samael, because it is said that the demiurge is the head archon, the head of all these beings that were created by accident, or that came into being by accident. And I don't see it as an accident. There could never be ultimately an accident. And that's why I feel that too many Gnostics are modern day Gnostics are kind of lost in a how shall I put it, a kind of depression that that they have such big hearts, and they feel such great pain over the suffering in the world, the suffering of others, and their own suffering, that they just can't accept that there isn't like justice, and that God isn't going to come and beat the shit out of the demiurge, and I don't think that's necessary. First, we have the light, and we have to remember the light, and that's our sun, the sunlight. And the sun has to be a spiritual being, because after all, I mean, what do your mother and father tell you when you were younger? that don't look directly into the sun. It'll damage your eyes. It's something so powerful in the natural order, so powerful that we cannot even look at it, yet it is the source of our life, and it is a source of light. It's so beautiful. And it is said that the Christ was originally a being that dwelt in the sun. And so you might choose to envision your body filled with brilliant white light, and or you can investigate sun gazing. Many shamans and people are doing that lately. I urge you to investigate this before you do it, because you can damage your eyes permanently if you do it. But if you do it right, and it's easy to do it right, you can have some wonderful, wonderful experiences. I don't know if you've seen, Chris, that the new article that the scientists discovered that all the light that our neurons produce in our brain. Did you read that?
No.
It's incredible that every one of our neurons releases photons, and this is going on all the time. And they calculated with it's incredible, the millions and millions of neurons that we have. It's just amazing what is in the human brain when we stop to think about creating these creatures, these archons. It's not so very hard to do when you start to think about it. It's not such a leap of faith, if you will, to think about an archon being created when you just look into your own brain and realize all the millions of neurons that are in there, everything that is taking place in there. And I think that there is great wisdom to be found in understanding the role of the unconscious. A lot of, now you must remember, when we're speaking here, we're speaking in almost song, almost myth, when we're talking about the pleroma, when we're talking about the love swoon of Sophia, when we're talking about as she's tumbling from the pleroma and she's coming into contact with this inorganic matter that is organizing itself, begins to organize itself. This is a type of singing like the bards used to do, and so much wonderful art and music comes out of our unconscious minds, right?
Absolutely.
I think that's what you really get off on, man, is the unconscious, because like I've listened to your channel, and it seems like the music that gets you off is music that is so profoundly like unconscious, and that is meant to be the highest of compliments, because that's we're walking around 95% of our us. It's we're unconscious.
Yeah.
We are swimming like the fish in the water. Is the fish aware of the water? Are we aware of our unconscious? Well, it's damn time that we begin to be. And through listening today to the music of Chris, and I'm serious, you can begin exploring your subconscious, your unconscious, and the oh, blessed scientists, they're coming out with some incredible things now, more and more. That, for example, how that we make decisions at least 10 seconds before we actually do something.
Yeah. It's incredible.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Um, so I hope I've been able to shed a little Gnostic light on this whole thing tonight.
Oh my God, yes. Jesus
Thanks, Chris.
Christ. Yeah. If you don't know about Gnosticism now, then you never will, people. This is the pulpit right here, where the wisdom is coming directly through your ear holes into your brain and soul, brought to you by Laurence, which is
Amen.
much, much, much appreciated. I feel like there is so much more that I wanted to get to, but maybe we just need to do a part two.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're up
Bless
for
you,
that.
Chris.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It just feels like now is the right time. We could talk more, but it feels like um, the Sufis say that when you begin to get thirsty, that's the time to stop talking. So I'm thirsty right now. So
Yes, and my stomach unfortunately is communicating to me that it is hungry. So
so
my body is sort of just
you're making contact with other
whining.
realms.
Yeah, exactly. The
Mhm.
gastral. I'm gastral traveling right now. um, but maybe perhaps we can aim for doing it maybe exactly 2 weeks from today.
Mm.
Maybe not next Saturday, but the following Saturday after that. If you're up for
Well,
that, maybe look at your calendar and
yes,
see.
yes, I'll
Okay,
do that. Well, let's talk, but I think that sounds like a great idea,
fantastic.
a
Because
blessed idea.
I think I've gotten about 1/5 of the way through my questions. So there's so much more to plumb and delve into that I want to do it all justice. So
Thank you, thank you.
yeah,
A million thanks, Chris. And I
likewise.
to say that I just simply enjoy these meetings between us is not sufficient. Uh, you are one of those very special angels that have come into my life and transformed my life. And and do people tell you you look like David Bowie?
No, I've never gotten that.
No, I'm picking a
No.
strong David Bowie vibe off of you right now. I don't know why.
Which era? Thin White
Oh,
Duke or Ziggy Stardust?
uh,
Or
no, not Ziggy Stardust, but well, tune in 2 weeks and
yes.
I'll have my answer for you.
Okay, fantastic. It'll be the cliffhanger
Yeah.
until the next episode. Well, yeah, we'll be in communication in between now and then, and we'll iron out the details.
Okay,
Okay.
my friend.
All right. Thank you so much, Laurence.
Thank you to Chris.
I
It's been
appreciate it so
wonderful.
much. Yeah, and I will put your website in the liner notes, and I'm going to have this out within the next week, and I'll send you the link to where it'll be. So feel free to share it.
Okay, and my best to all of your listeners, and you're always welcome to contact me and friend me on Facebook. And if you have any pressing, heartfelt questions, I'll do my best to answer them. So
All right. Well, thank you so much, Laurence.
All right. Take good care of yourself, Chris.
Yes, likewise. Get some water, and I will get some food, and
Okay.
we'll meet back here in 2 weeks.
It's a deal.
All right.
All
To
right. See you
date.
later.
All right. See you,
Yes.
Lawrence.
All right.
Farewell.
Bye-bye.
Lawrence is a good guy. He really is. His heart is in the right place. He's a very, very sweet person, and I feel lucky to have had a couple of opportunities to have nice, long, extensive conversations with him, especially this one, 2.5 hours, and we barely touched my question list. And I can't wait for part 2, which, if everything goes as planned, should happen in a couple of weeks. So keep your eyes peeled. Part 2 of and we didn't really even get into the book that much. Most of it was just him talking about what he went through with his bad health, and basically running down the foundations of Gnosticism, which there could still be said more about that. So we'll probably tackle that next time too. So please stay tuned. And I just want to thank you so much for listening. And I am very giddy to be able to steer you to the website that is finally up and running, www.themeltpodcast.com. And you will find all the past episodes leading up to this one. And I'm very, very proud of it. I'm glad that it's been a long time coming. This podcast and the interviews that I've done for it started a little over a year ago, and the website is just now getting up. So it's been a long time coming. And if you out there if you like what I'm doing and you think that the conversations contained within are worthwhile, and you think that there might be people that might be interested, please steer them my way. I also have a Facebook page, and I have a Patreon page. I would definitely like to expand the parameters of this podcast. I would like to be able to go out to other places and do interviews, go to where the people are instead of doing them all via Zoom. Maybe go to some conventions and do some interviews there, and maybe even do some on-site recording of different things that sort of apply to the things that we talk about here. And the Patreon page is www.patreon.com/themeltpodcast. And anything that you could contribute would be very much appreciated. Anything as low as $1 a month would be a great help, just to know that that's coming in, and to know that I have that money to work with in order to feed it back into the podcast and make it as good as I can make it. I can always use an equipment upgrade and help to be able to afford to pay people to help would be incredible. And, the big long-term dream of this is to maybe do this for a living. It sounds preposterous to say it, but why not? This is something that I'm very passionate about, and I think it's important that these conversations are out there, and that there is a place where people not only can talk about these things, but just go to hear other people talk about them. And while I'm at it, I'm always open to hearing your stories out there. If you've listened to some of the past episodes, some of them begin with stories from listeners. And I usually try and put them before topics that have to do with, that pertain to the story that is being told. So, yeah, if any of you have experiences that you would like to talk about, or know somebody that does, please direct them to themeltpodcast@gmail.com. Just, as simple as just recording it on your phone, emailing it there, and I will see if I can find a place for it. But I would love to hear them nonetheless. So, all right. Thank you all so much. And I'm really excited about all of this. And I hope that you guys are too, and that you would like to see more of it. Please don't hesitate to let me know. And if you have guest suggestions, I'm always open for that too. So, thanks so much, and I will see you next time.